Yes.
Oh.
The
That tells you something, my answer.
they should be in Martin's eating papers team
Oh, right,
file, but
right.
I can.
No. I'll look at it. I'm incompetent as normal, so I'll find it. Don't worry. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
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 Hello. I've been out for a run this morning. Aileen?
A long walk, not a run.
Oh, have you already? Oh, right.
Yeah,
Taking the dog out, have you?
absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's funny these days when it's pouring with rain and you see all these dogs being walked and all the dogs look really fed up and just want to go home, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we did that on, I think it was, Tuesday last week. We got absolutely soaked through.
Oh.
And yeah, we were happy, but the dog wasn't.
No, I don't think so. They're more sensible than they look, dogs, I think.
Yeah, what interests me about the dogs is they've got better wardrobes than I have. They've all got raincoats on and
I know, yeah,
coats, and jackets.
Mine hates wearing a coat, so it has to be really, really cold or really, really wet for me to put it on him.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock. Shall we get started? Welcome, everyone. Good morning. So we'll just go through as normal. Chairman's welcome. Any public questions, Julie?
No.
Okay, apologies.
No apologies.
Declarations of any other business? Declarations of interest? Minutes of the meeting on the 14th of December. Any corrections, please? Item 5.2 is the action log and matters arising. As far as I can see, they're all either in hand or done, unless anyone wants to raise anything. Okay, let's move on to item 6 under the quality section, patient story, care home story, and we welcome our colleagues. And Debbie, perhaps you can just introduce everyone.
Yeah, so it's just Karina here. I don't think you've brought anyone else with you, have you, Karina? It's just Karina here this morning. Oh, you have?
I've got Catherine Santos and Ruth McLeod.
Oh,
so
yes,
Catherine
I can
is
see you now.
and Ruth is an OT, so they will be on hand for any questions afterwards to support me.
So this is a sort of service development improvement story this morning, looking at it through the patient lens, but using a bit of QI, so something slightly different. I will hand over to Karina.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see that? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so my name's Karina Green. I'm the care home support team lead for West Berkshire. I've got a counterpart that covers the East. I am an occupational therapist by background, and as I said, Catherine Santos, if you give a wave, Catherine, is our physio, and Ruth is our AT, band 7 therapist. So I will start. Oh, can I get the? Yep. So here's the team. We're part of the care home support team. The postural management team is a separate sub team. And what really, in essence, what this is about is proactive care. So we support care homes, and we do that by training, role modelling, and we provide resources. The postural management team do see patients and hold a caseload around postural management. We're part of a postural management specialist group as well. So our work is obviously governed by evidence-based practice. I'll just tell you a little bit about what a hand contracture is. So it's a chronic loss of reduction of range of motion. So often following lots of time of not using that hand, can be due to dementia, neuro problems, lots of reasons why you may get a contracture. Ultimately, they are preventable, and that's a scary thing, because we found that we're coming across some really nasty tight hands, and once those hands become clenched, then access to the skin for hand hygiene is really tricky, and that's when the risks just increase. You can get really clammy, smelly hands, but fingernails digging into palms, so pressure sores, pressure damage. It can be a real problem. Now, if you like, I just have a go at clenching your hand throughout the duration of this presentation, and then yeah, just keep it going, and then at the end just release that hand if it doesn't distract you too much from the presentation. So go back to the team. The team was formed following a pilot in 2019 where the incidence of pressure ulcers and contractures amongst residents there was a problem there, and the team were then commissioned because they were able to show that if you managed contractures, you reduced pressure ulcers. Now we've now specialised into hands as a result of seeing that nationally there was no how do you treat hands. There was not there we from our literature reviews we weren't coming across anything to guide us as to how to treat hands. So this is a lady who had her hand progressed over time. It didn't just happen overnight. And unfortunately, the home were unaware that they were able to receive support. So we received this referral ultimately when it was really chronic, unfortunately, and her thumb required amputation. So, as I said, you know, we want to avoid this happening for people. So sorry, this is a really poor slide. It's really blurry. As part of my Yellow Belt project, hand contractures was what I focused on. It was really nice to not jump in with a problem solution focus and actually do that root cause analysis and go through the QI methodology instead of jumping to solutions, which is typically what we tend to do as therapists, but it doesn't then tackle why the problem happened in the first place at times. So but from our project, we saw 100% increase in referrals. So we got the message across with our training and resources, and homes were referring to us, which was great. So we've got 13 documents now, 13 guidance documents. I've presented the project to the postural management specialist group and a couple of other forums, and the feedback has been really positive, and we're getting a lot of requests to publish what we've done, which is great. So we've been really, it's an innovative practice at the end of the day. We're using products and we're crossing into the nursing boundaries as well, because actually these products are dressings, but they work really well for hands. And so Cutimed Sorbac, so those odorous hands that I mentioned, this product basically helps reduce the moisture, takes the bacterial load off the hand. The Dermis Plus product here gives some really nice pressure relieving properties for the hands, so you can weave it through the fingers. You can make it adaptable for that person's individual needs. Rolled up bandage is actually something that's a really simple way to keep the range of somebody's hand as well. So it's not always complex. So this is a palm protector. But many of the patients that we're talking about when we're saying severe hands, they are beyond this palm protector. Their hands are too tight. So this is an example of a lady who, that was her presenting posture. As you can see, there's no air getting to the palm of the hand. There's a lot of pressure going through that palm. Dermis Plus, just rolled up. I say just, there is a lot of thought that goes behind it. but you can see that the range of her fingers is now accessible in that space. So it's just not happening. These hands are unfortunately being ignored and not seen as an issue. And that's what we're trying to change. The other major aspect around our the patients that we see, I would say 90% have got severe cognitive problems like advanced dementia, and they don't have capacity to make decisions around their care. That we are working with care home residents who are very complex. So in terms of the patient's voice, we are the patient's voice in these scenarios. We have to apply the Mental Capacity Act very, very carefully. We have to involve relatives and the appropriate people to liaise with in terms of determining the right pathway of care for them. This person who I'll refer to as Aya, unfortunately, we came across this man and we noticed that he had a really tricky hand, and we asked the care staff to show us how hand hygiene was being managed. And unfortunately, it triggered a safeguarding because extreme force, which you could class as assault, was being used to prise open his hand. He was evidently in extreme pain. However, there was quite a task-orientated approach to performing his hand hygiene, and the member of staff just had it in her mind, I need to clean this hand. And that is not okay, and unfortunately that's what we're coming across. From speaking to the daughter, so the team went in, and what I later found out is she'd been flagging with the home, look, this hand isn't right, he's in pain, and she felt nothing was done about it. And so she's absolutely thrilled with the outcome, because we needed to take a very holistic approach, and for one session it took 2 hours, and to cut a long story short, as a result, when we initially started going in, he was quite fearful, understandably. He was protective of his hands. He didn't want it touched. After a few sessions, he was actually laying out his arm, and he knew that trust had developed. And he, despite having advanced dementia, what I've now learned, which is fascinating, is there's an emotional memory. And he associated the fact that the team were coming in to care for his hand, and he knew, and he was trusting. There was a complete holistic approach around a liaison with GP. Pain relief was in place, but it wasn't optimized. It's raised lots of questions because, how do you document when, or should there be documentation for when you can't see areas of the skin in terms of pressure area checks? We should be examining all parts of the body, but with these hands that you can't see, what's happening underneath those fingers? And so we were actually able to see what was underneath those fingers eventually. His daughter has said that he is the happiest he has been for a long time. And she feels that's as a result of our intervention. We've put in guidelines as to how to approach the task, which isn't, this is where it's not just about the hands. The impact is in all aspects of his care, because now we know how to work with this gentleman, and we can advise the carers, you do need to take your time, don't use, he doesn't like bright light. The other aspect is he's Italian, So the team, we used translation services, and we spoke to him in Italian, and we got the best out of him. And so, yeah. How much time have I got left? 2 minutes?
Yeah.
So in summary, the impact of the team was we were able to determine an appropriate care plan for care of this man's hand, which, as I said, really impacts other aspects of his care. We introduced barrier products. So barrier products are very commonly used for areas like the bottom when there's pressure damage, but they should be used for the hand as well if you've got areas of risk of pressure damage, moisture damage. So barrier products are now being used. We've got a reduced pressure risk products, and we've got an appropriate hand hygiene care plan in place for him. And we've aided that increase of movement of his hand, which is an amazing outcome. So I've alluded to the benefit to this gentleman, but he's evidently in, oh, I've lost that page now. He's evidently in reduced pain. He's presenting as happier, and he's more compliant with his care. So a multitude of benefits for him. And when people are classed as challenging, which this home unfortunately said, oh, he's really challenging, actually he was in a lot of pain. So the view of that person was really unfortunate, because there is a reason why somebody is presenting in a certain way, and so for this gentleman, obviously we were able to get down to what that was. Just quickly, the team have really enjoyed working on this project. It's been a whole MDT approach. We've had care home pharmacists, TVNs. We wish to work a bit more closely with TVNs, but they've supported us with identifying suitable products and using it in the correct way. We've had their approval in that respect. Care home staff have found our guidance easy to read, applicable as well. So hopefully that's trickling over into other residents who will benefit from it. We've done things like fingernail care. Well, there's nothing about fingernail care out there, and we've produced resources around which has been approved by podiatry. So a whole multitude of resources. So I've said a bit about next steps, publishing. I need to speak to Katie Humphreys about obtaining more relative feedback, because that's predominantly where my team will get lots of feedback. It's unfortunately, I Want Great Care is only going to capture a very tiny proportion of our work. Also, we need to produce guidelines around when using water is not appropriate for somebody's hand, and that's a big issue actually, because we always think we need to wash using water, but if you can't get into somebody's hand, that can cause water ingress can be actually causing lots and lots of problems. So that's our next guidance document. Done.
Thank you very much. It's fascinating. I gave up clenching my fist. Are we allowed to? we have some members of the board who are very good at this sort of stuff, but not me. Sally.
You can let go now, Aileen.
A really interesting study, and when I think, it's almost as though this clenched hand is normalised, isn't it?
Yeah.
I did wonder, Karina, and you may not be able to answer this question, whether you think this study would be transferable to our inpatient wards where we have elderly patients given that, you know, you see so many elderly people with these clenched hands, whether we've got people in our inpatient facilities who may be in a very similar situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the postural management care needs is we do a lot of training, and we do that within our pressure care training as well. So the trust pressure care training, we've got a postural management slot as well.
Right.
So Catherine and Ruth present within that. So it is going out to the needs of postural management is the message is getting across to other staff in terms of a training aspect as well.
Right, just one little more question. Postural management, is that more than the hands? Do you do all sorts of postural management? I won't ask you any more, but I just wanted to check that. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay, I just got one, Karina, that I know nothing about the subject, but it seems to me that the education of the techniques that you've developed in care homes widely, because you can't go out and do it all, I guess, our own staff doing it. So you want to educate the care home staff so they can recognise and know, at least for normal cases, if I can call it that, what to do. Is that going on? Is that and is it going on across the whole of Berkshire?
Yeah, we offer a regular training programme for postural management training to care homes. So that's an ongoing rolling programme, and unfortunately there's a lot of staff turnover in care homes. So there is a real need to keep that going. And we also offer postural management champions as well. And we offer supervision. So if there are care home staff that really enjoy that type of work, we give them extra support to fulfill that role as well. Very
good, thank you for that. Well, I don't think we got any detailed questions. I think this is so I'm just worried about my hand, but that's all right.
Yeah, please let go.
Yeah, I will. But that's great, really good work, and it's good to see that the QI process being used and then being rolled out across the care homes and indeed across the trust. So thank you and your colleagues very much. I think we'll let you go and we'll carry on with our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you,
Catherine.
bye.
Okay, well, that was good. Did anyone hold it? Only you, Aileen, that held a fist all through that? Yeah.
It really hurt though by the end.
Yeah, it's a competitive streak in you, Aileen. It's really good.
It did hurt though by the end of it, didn't it? And it's comparatively, it's not that long.
No,
Yeah,
no.
absolutely surprising. Very interesting.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you, Debbie. We can now move on to Freedom to Speak Up Guardians report. Mike Crosati. Is Mike here? Yes, you are. I can see you.
Yes, morning, everyone. Thank you. Doesn't seem like 6 months since I've been here. I was here last. Time flies. How would you like to take this?
I think, Mike, we take the paper as read, but there's if you could pick out some of those sort of conclusions about how it's developing and what things still need to be done. Your recommendations, which I'm sure we all support, but can you be a bit more specific about some of the types of issues or the types of
so I think the thing I'd like to concentrate on today is around turnover. So the section there on exit interviews and people's reflections on Freedom to Speak Up and how it may or may not have been a benefit to them. Obviously, we've gone from 57% turnover to 52%, but that's still obviously an outlier and significantly different from most services and the trust's overall turnover figure of, which I think is now just under 14%, and bearing in mind Julian's target of 12% that he mentioned at yesterday's Leaders and Managers Forum. I suppose the ask really is of the board, what specifically over and above encouraging and supporting Freedom to Speak Up process can be done to make that a significant change towards turnover. I think there are perhaps three issues. But first of all, the length of time it takes for somebody to actually talk to me, plucking up the courage, the anxiety. They may have spoken to others and hasn't been resolved. Something around the processes. So some of the HR processes, how can we speed that up? All it takes is for somebody not to engage, and a fact find or investigation can be significantly delayed. And I suppose the third bit is around the outcome. How satisfied are people with the outcome, considering it's around behaviours? Have those behaviours actually changed within that team or service? I think that things that will help are things like leaders and managers training, leading for impact. That I think will have a bit of a difference, but that's only a maximum of 20 people per month, and as yet I think we're month 4 and it's never been fully subscribed. So, bearing in mind there's probably a fair bit of backlog of managers. What else can we be doing to change the culture and get leaders and managers more engaged, I suppose, in the listening up, the following up, so that the cases don't really get to me. They're dealt with at source. So I suppose that is the thing I would like to concentrate on this morning.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Tamina.
Yes, thank you, Mike. That's a really helpful comment, actually, because one of the things I've been talking to my team about is how we grab hold of issues in teams before they get to the point where they feel almost impossible to address. And they were saying it's a number of things. Part of it's around supporting managers, particularly sort of our more junior managers and more inexperienced, about how they can address particularly difficult issues, have difficult conversations, how they can pull support into them. So there's something we need to do within our divisions, and then also how we reflect that through some of the management and leadership training. So I'd be really happy to work with you on some of that.
So the module I deliver is around those courageous conversations, civility, psychological safety, etc. But as I said, that's not reaching probably as many people as it should.
Okay. Sally.
I wonder if you could just say a little bit more, Mike, around your sentence. There is still a general feeling of not being listened to. That's been quite sort of controversial at a national level, hasn't it? Recently,
yes.
I'm thinking of the doctors around Lucy Letby. Is this sort of in conversation? Is that how you're picking that up?
It is not just in conversation. So I've done several surveys over the last few years. The last one with Woking Community Nursing, that was specifically around sort of anti-racism, etc. But there is a sentiment, I suppose, similar to acts of violence and aggression against staff, that these things may be reported, but do they go into a hole? Are they actually being dealt with? What is the feedback? And so there is a perception there of, am I actually being listened to? Are things actually being dealt with? Can I tangibly see a difference, an outcome?
Right, and that's sort of general across, not just in particular pockets.
I think there are various topics. So there's stuff around violence, aggression, stuff around microaggressions, and the anti-racist approach, racial abuse, etc.
Right.
But also around poor behaviours, which is sort of most of what I get to hear about. I suppose the staff experience. We talk about patient experience. It's the staff experience. What feedback do I get?
Yes, yeah. And just when you talk about 2% left and 5%, What does that equate to in numbers? Because it's
So it was 39 cases reported for the period in that report, but the exit interviews was from quarter four last year through till end of quarter two this year, because obviously if it's too far in the past, natural attrition comes
Yes.
into play, and if it's too near the date, then people wouldn't have had exit interviews. So it's sort of finding that time, that slice of time that is probably most relevant to get some decent data for you.
right. Thank you.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mina, I was particularly pleased that you picked up Mike's first point there with your team, because one of the recurring themes that I find in looking at cases and talking to Mike is that it is very often too late, I feel, when people feel that they approach the freedom to speak up process and things have been allowed to fester or develop to a point, rather than, and people often make this comment and use the phrase, I wish this could have been nipped in the bud. It would have been so much simpler. And for me, it's a case of how can we find ways of encouraging people either to approach Mike or Jane and her team in the HR function at a very early stage, rather than allow things to develop where positions become almost entrenched and far more difficult then to resolve. And so I'd be interested, I'm pleased that you're talking that through, particularly with your junior managers newly appointed, to see what works successfully in your area. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Jane.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, because Mike works very closely with my team, despite obviously having to keep some information private. So we do really learn a lot from what Mike is telling us. I think the point I want to go back on is this people not thinking that something's happening, and that's often the tension between privacy and people understanding outcomes. So there may have been action taken, but because we can't talk about that and we're not allowed, we have a duty of privacy towards people, they think nothing's happened. And that's always going to be a tension that we have. They don't realise that something has taken place behind the scenes. They just don't know about it because we can't tell them.
Okay. Alex.
Yeah, I suppose on outcomes, it'd be really helpful to try and agree kind of the practical, pragmatic outcomes that each party can expect. So the person raising concerns, as well as what happens behind the scenes, as James said, potentially with managers and so on. And the other aspect of this is the leadership and management programme will help us in the next period. We have just created a pool, really. That's why we're undersubscribed at the moment. And I know Ash Ellis will be going out to divisional directors to do a more triangulated, targeted approach to those new managers and those pockets, as Debbie has said in the chat. We do triangulate where we have issues and we can target our resources and support. But I think it starts with the team lead and the manager getting the support in there. That would be the first place we'd want this picked up.
Okay, Mike, I just got one or two things. Well, one is that I was pleased to see, and it sounds a bit odd, but that more staff with ethnically diverse backgrounds are approaching the Guardian for advice or support. So, because one of the problems is that people don't raise things. It sounds as though our ethnic minority staff are now feeling more confident to raise issues. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes, I think so. I think I've had significantly more conversations around advice and support and what are my options, even if people haven't gone on then to raise a formal concern. So sort of the advisory service type thing is doing quite well with all staff groups, but specifically around those with ethnically diverse backgrounds.
Okay, and the overall, of course, we have very high levels of confidence in speaking up as a trust, which is absolutely what we want. But I think there's something I can't quite know the answer. Jane made the point about the feedback, because if you raise something and it feels it's taking a long time, and you don't get the feedback, or the feedback you get is a bit bland, I can understand the frustration. It's a bit like when you complain about some, I don't know, utility company or something, and they take ages to come back to you. When they do, they just tell you they value you as a customer or something. Nothing changes. So it's somehow how you can make that more meaningful without breaching confidentiality, as Jane indicated. And then my last question is about, are we still reaching everyone? That is, there are people in trust who work unusual shift patterns and things like that, or whatever. And I just wonder if we feel confident that all the publicity we put in their place to make people aware, staff aware, whether there's still pockets of staff, because of their nature of their employment, they work nights all the time or whatever it is, that we don't feel know about their freedom to speak up and what we can do. Do you think that's still a case, or do you think we're reaching everyone?
It's difficult to say 100%. Certainly, my most recent conversations with colleagues is around how do we target those groups. So rather than doing stuff around email, looking at posters or leaflets or other ways of contacting them, and trying to do it through line managers as well, so that the line managers can cascade that information. I also on occasions go to places like Prospect Park, go in early so to catch the night shift as people are leaving. But yeah, I think there's always room for improvement.
Okay, but the message I'm getting is there's lots of things we're doing right. There's some things we need to do more of. But it's a sort of continuous improvement type pictures. Is that a fair assumption?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing else people want to raise, thank you very much, Mike, for that. Very helpful.
Thank you very much.
And if there's anything that you think we need to know before 6 months is up, just let us know.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Okay, can we move on to 6.2, the Quality Assurance Committee of 28th of November. Sally, I'll just leave this all to you, if I may, just take us through this section.
Yes, of course. This was a very straightforward meeting. 3/4 of it, as colleagues will see from the minutes, was taken up by 3 presentations. The first was the role of the Family Liaison Officer, which is a new role that's evolved out of the new National Patient Safety Incident Framework. And you'll see from the minutes that actually it would appear that trusts have chosen to implement this role in different ways, and it essentially ensures families are supported during an investigation or a review, and answer any questions and share lessons learned in an open and honest way. And actually, I'll say this as an aside, and Debbie might want to say something at the end of this. I thought this was quite pertinent in retrospect, because after the Quality Assurance Committee, I understand that there's going to be a review of the whole duty of candour policy at a national level, and the Family Liaison Officer makes a big contribution to that. We then had the Director of Estates and Facilities, Martin Mannix, and that was really an update on the non-clinical aspects of the action plan around the Never event that occurred in December 22 around the shower curtain that didn't collapse. And I suppose the take-home message, well, certainly for me for this, was that the incident certainly highlighted the need for closer working relationships between the trust and the PFI special purpose vehicle. And colleagues will see from the minutes that the sort of where we are on the action plan. And the third presentation was Mark Davison, who this came out of some concerns around digital integration between us and some of the acute hospitals, and the implication there for patient safety. And what Mark I was able to do was to give some assurance to the committee around the sort of long-term and short-term solutions that we're taking forward to minimise any of those risks. Quality concerns. I know Debbie in Part B is going to talk about EIP and remodelling Campion. But actually, you know, you'll see there that we've taken out Westcall, podiatry and the heart function. And I'm happy to take questions on any other aspects of the minutes. Learning from deaths, you'll see the numbers there. There's big focus on learning from deaths nationally as a result of Lucy Letby. And what we're going to see from January is much more thematic learning from deaths from both the serious incident report and the mortality review process, but certainly none of the deaths of a physical healthcare subject to second stage review raised any governance causes for concern. And then Guardian of Safe Working, there were no exception reports. The subcommittee gained assurance around that, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, so questions with Debbie.
Not a question, but I'll just clarify the duty of candor bit. So the national policy isn't changing. The work we've been doing with Making Families Count and NHS resolution is around what good looks like in applying that in a sensitive manner that is meaningful for families. So we, along with a couple of other trusts nationally, have worked with NHSR, and a video is produced that helps to support organisations. And we've also been working with Making Families Count, which is a national charity made up primarily of people who have lost family members through some form or the other from where there's been NHS involvement, and it's around what good looks like for them in terms of investigation and duty of candour. And we've now published a good practice guidance around that, which is being spread nationally. So that's what the duty of candour element was about. And Debbie, our flow, and a number of us have been involved in that.
Yeah, there's a general feeling, Debbie, isn't there, that some trusts aren't as candid as they might be?
I think different places do interpret things slightly differently, and there are different applications of duty of candour, although of course it is part of the CQC registration and regulations, so does get picked up from time to time. But yes, there's definitely some organisations that probably apply it in a more compassionate and kind way at the moment than others, I would say.
Okay. Anything else on those two? I must say, I'm always reassured by the Learning from Deaths report. It always looks a very, very thorough piece of work.
It's very comprehensive, I think, the process.
Yeah, thank you. Guardians of Safe Working, I think that's just almost take that as read, can't we?
Yes, absolutely. There's no issues.
Okay, in which case, thank you very much for that. Executive report, Julian's report at 7. Take it as read. Just questions for Julian. I suppose Aileen.
Yeah, I just wondered about the COVID comments about the uptake of the vaccine, and the fact I just wondered what we thought the rest of the winter period might be, combined with the strikes as well.
I can talk about flu and COVID. Minnie might want to come in about from an industrial action perspective. I mean, it would be fair to say that nationally it's been really hard work getting flu and COVID vaccination uptake this year. That's across the general public who are entitled to it, as well as staff. So it's this. So we're at about 44-45% now, which is lower than pre-COVID, probably about the same as last year, but lower than pre-COVID. And we're definitely getting more resistance to people being told they should be having vaccines. We are seeing nationally a spasmodic uptick in COVID in terms of hospitalisation. I think there's been a fair bit of it around, but the numbers coming into hospital with it, certainly in our system, have remained pretty low. We have spasmodically had a few cases, so we've got a few cases today on mental health and in physical health, but we aren't seeing large numbers at the moment, and I would anticipate that's probably going to continue, Aileen. If throughout the winter period, we might see, you know, a few more outbreaks, but generally we aren't seeing significant numbers at the moment. Flu was anticipated it might be a bad year this year because Southern Hemisphere. We've seen a few we haven't seen many cases. The acute trusts have seen a few cases of influenza causing hospitalisation, but not, you know, not in big numbers at all at the moment. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that remains the same.
No, it sounds good news then, really.
Well, the thing we can say, I hope, is that all the board have had their vaccinations. I think we've all done that, haven't we? So that's trying to show an example.
Absolutely.
Anything else for Julian? Okay, can we move on then to performance? Item 8, finance report. Paul.
Thanks, Martin. So from a financial perspective, overall, I'd say we're still in a relatively healthy and solid position heading into the latter part of the financial year. So year to date, we've got a surplus of 300,000 at the end of October, 1.6 million better than planned. Financial performance dipped slightly in October. So we had October is when we normally pay the Medics Clinical Excellence Awards. It's a one-off payment covering the year. That's planned, so that was 400,000 in month. What wasn't planned was the increase in placement costs that we saw coming through during the month. The key points just to note, so in terms of elective recovery, which just to remind the board, this is additional community activity in the West over and above historic kind of pre-COVID activity levels. We're still continuing to perform well against the target that we've been given. Overall, we've got about £600,000 worth of additional income that we've generated. We've booked 100,000 of that, and we've got 500,000 that at the moment we're just having conversations with Bob around the application of the rules. We think we're entitled to that, and we have to get resolution on that. In terms of pay position, we're still underspent against our plan. October saw a small increase in substantive staff, much higher increase in temporary staffing costs, predominantly at the end of the month, covering annual leave over the holiday period. We're still continuing to maintain agency costs within the national target of 3.7%. We're at about 3.1%, and that's been a relatively consistent level during the past quarter. As I indicated previously, the main area of concern in October was the increase in placements, out of area placements that we've seen. So we saw the average number of placements increase from 21 in September to 37 in October. That drove our costs up by 400,000 to 1.2 million in a month. So quite substantial financial pressure. We're fully utilising all of the additional contracted beds that we took on to try and absorb some of this. What we're seeing is at the moment we always see peaks and troughs, but what we're seeing and what we saw in October was quite rapid increase in a short space of time. Just to give some board assurance, we've checked the numbers today and we're back down to 22. So a lot of those admissions that we saw in October have started to come, but certainly through November, you'll see this in the report next month. We've continued with high numbers during that period. Moving on, just capital, we're 1.4 behind our 4 million plan year to date. Plans in place to fully utilise capital allocation before the end of this year, so I'm not concerned that we won't spend what we've agreed to spend. And in terms of cash, we've agreed all of the contractual positions with our ICBs and we've got cash aligned with payments now. So that's pushed our cash back up, and we're 2.6 million ahead of where we expect to be on cash, 56.7 million currently in the bank at the end of October. Happy to take any questions, Martin.
Thank you. Questions? I've got a couple of things, Paul, if I may. One is on page 86. It talks about under your key messages section, the underspend on substantive staffing is also offsetting cost pressures caused by the higher than planned payroll. Do I interpret that actually we're not recruiting enough staff? Is that the correct interpretation of that? We're still failing to recruit enough substantial staff, or is it just a sort of a blip? Or
there's two elements there, which is one, the mention of the inflation in pay award. So we know that we've been underfunded for pay award. We estimate it's about probably full year impact of about £1 million. But because we're underspent on our pay position in terms of what you quite rightly said, which is we have a plan that assumes that we will have a higher number of staff than we currently have. We're not seeing that £1 million pressure because it's been absorbed by the underspend on pay.
Okay. Does that answer my question?
Sorry. So are we recruiting enough staff? No, we're behind where we expected to be in terms of recruitment this year.
Okay. All right. And then it may be the same issue on page 89 under cost improvement schemes. There's a line under your key messages that says the under delivery within the mental health division relates to staffing for inpatient services and medical staffing costs. I wasn't quite sure what that under delivery was that caused by, again, not having enough staff, or is that about, I just didn't quite understand what that means.
So that one's slightly different. So in terms of the plan, mental health inpatient specifically is running with more staff than we expected, and it's predominantly due to bed pressures and acuity. So potentially we've got more staff requiring one-to-ones, which is requiring more staffing into that area.
Okay, so, all right. So it's not we've got too many. It's not we've got too many staff. It's just that the demand is up, and therefore we've got to have the staff to manage the demand or the acuity of the patients. Okay, yes. That's all right. Sorry, it's a bit of a silly question. Anything else anyone wants to raise? Okay, so we go on the performance report 8.1, Paul.
Okay, thank you. So just starting focusing on the breakthrough objectives that are currently red. So self-harm 50 versus a target of 42. As usual, this is driven by a relatively small number of patients in a relatively small number of areas. So 12 patients driving that activity this month, 80% of the cases in terms of 2 wards, Daisy and Rose. Teams are continuing to look at areas of focus like neurodiversity and other conditions that are presenting in these patients, continuing to push training to NHS professionals, temporary bank staff to improve what they can, and taking an opportunity to learn from others. And I've got a peer review scheduled for 17th of December. So doing what we can to bring these numbers down. Linked to what we said around out of area placements, we've got the new target around clinically ready for discharge and the number of bed days lost to patients that could be discharged. Increased numbers in October to 434, so quite a way above the 250 target. And obviously that's manifested in terms of the pressure on the beds and the increase in out of area placements that we've just discussed in the finance report. In terms of driver metrics, we're still showing red on I Want Great Care in terms of compliance and response rate, although compliance rates at 4.5 are increasing steadily compared to where we've been in the first 2 quarters of this year. Again, referencing out of area placements, reached well ahead of target in October for the aforementioned reasons. In a couple of greens, so staff turnover, we still remain well within target, which is really good, and finances we've said are already better than we planned, so both green. Trackers, there's a few reds, but probably the key ones to note are around occupancy rates for acute and non-acute mental health beds, which remain high, and average length of stay, which still remains relatively high, although has reduced slightly. And sickness was still above our 3.5% target, but at 3.9, that's still relatively low compared to others. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Paul. We're going to have a chance, I think, to talk about the pressures on mental health beds in inpatient in part 2, I think, and it should be an interesting discussion. Any questions for Paul? Sally?
Self-harm, Paul, does look as though it's on its way up, and I totally agree that actually it's usually you always need a narrative around those figures, because it's often 1 or 2 patients who are pushing the numbers up. I just wondered, and this is just a suggestion, whether, for example, October 23, 50, and then you put brackets 1 times 20 or 1. Do you know, it gives an idea around. It's just a suggestion, because you just cannot look at those figures and say, oh, you know, there's something going on here, can you? Because it's often just well, not just, but it's individual patients, and I wonder whether there's any way of putting these numbers in a way that sort of gives some indication that actually it's 1 times 20 or 2 times whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if you, on the fuller pack, in terms of the I think it's page 99 of the fuller pack, on the graph that shows the trend on this, we do include the number of patient incidents there now, so that you can see that.
Right. No, I was just looking at performance scorecard and just the raw numbers. So thank you.
Okay, anything else? Thank you very much, Paul. Let's move on to item 9, People Strategy and Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion Update. Alex.
Yeah, so we have the paper here. Jane, would you like to highlight particular aspects?
Yeah, just to say a couple of things. On the turnover, which is our principal measure of our people work, the turnover is now at 13.4%, which is one of the lowest rates that we have seen for a long time, certainly the lowest since pre-pandemic. And what's more reassuring is actually that our turnover has declined faster than our peers. So as you know, we did a lot of work looking at how we could reduce turnover, and we think that that has helped us to meet some of that target, although we can't say it's all entirely to do with that work. I think you'd like to know also our final survey response. What you saw in the paper was our first response rate, without the adjustments that are made for papers and for leavers. Our final survey response rate seems to be at 66.8%, which frustratingly puts us in second place for response rates across the NHS by 0.01, I've been told.
You must work harder, Jane.
I know, so near and so far. The good news, though, is that it's one of our highest response rates to date. I don't think we've ever seen a response rate like that. People who've been here longer, please correct me if that's the case. It means that we're getting much, much closer to getting a real employee voice here. Yeah, so that's a key thing. And then I just really wanted to update you on some of the talent work and the anti-racism piece, because we've been talking about how could we cascade talent processes through the organisation without it becoming burdensome, and we've been talking and thinking about this, and I think we had a bit of a breakthrough last week, didn't we, at your anti-racism work stream, Alex, where we were talking about focusing on the staff progression piece and potentially looking at how we could really do some focus our talent work around our ethnically diverse groups. But again, that's the bit of work in progress at the moment. Other than that, I think everything's in the paper or in the link, so happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? I mean, some good progress. Any questions for Jane, Alex? I guess the $64,000, whatever it is, question is, which you touched on, is the do we know the reasons why turnover is going down, getting better?
Well, we still know that we lose which is typical across all industries, that most of our leavers are in the under 5-year category. So people are moving quite quickly. It's why we're wanting to focus on what we call the competency-based progression work, because we do know quite a few, we know the main reasons people leave. They leave either because they can get more money elsewhere, so they're going into London, and there's not a lot we can do about that. We're saying, is there more that we can do to give them some salary progression, or move them much faster through the grade system when they're ready to do so? So that's the big area that we want to focus on next. And as I say, that's through the competency-based progression. So people come in at grade 5 and we can accelerate them through to a grade 6 once we think that they're at the right level of competency. So we're looking at that.
Okay, thank you. Sally?
Actually, Jane, that was the very question I wanted to ask you, because when I go around, I get a lot of feedback around people moving quickly from band 5 to band 6. And I just wondered whether it could sort of, given that we've got the competency framework, which I think, in theory is a fantastic idea, whether we're saying, well, you've got to go through this framework before you can get a band 6, but what they're actually doing is getting jobs elsewhere quite quickly. Do you see it might sort of backfire on us a wee bit?
It may do, Sally, but ultimately patient safety is our key priority. And if somebody else wants to take someone that we wouldn't necessarily give a grade 6 to, I would prefer that than we accelerate someone through to a grade 6 before they're ready to do so. So the competency framework is intended not to look at, is somebody a fully fledged grade 6, but have they shown the right skills and experience to be, and the leadership behaviours as well, the behaviours to be able to go into a talent pool and go into a sort of grade 6 role when one becomes available. So, and we're looking at that. We started with a 5 to 6 group, and we start at 3 to 4s, and we'll be moving next to ward managers, because I know that was something that Tamina wanted us to look at particularly. So that will be our next area of focus. And alongside that, it isn't just about the competencies to do the job, it's how people do the job. So it's that culture piece, which is where the leadership behaviours are coming in. And that's the piece that we're working on at the moment. But yeah, Sally, we may still lose people that we don't think that we would put to a grade 6, but I would prefer that than we compromise on our standards.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the ward managers often say, isn't it? People getting really quickly. It's difficult.
Yeah, and honestly, really what I'd like to get to is that we can identify our staff and that are ready to promote, and they don't, and we can proactively move them through our organisation rather than them feeling that they have to go elsewhere. You will always lose some people because we haven't got the right roles for them, or we haven't got the right locations for them. The other thing I think that has been quite successful, which is still early days, but has helped us, I think, to retain people, is we do now have a system whereby people can contact us if they can't get flexible working, and we know that has we've had about 100 people or so come through that process, and I think in all but 4 cases we've been able to find alternative arrangements for them, either within their own team or within another team. So I do think that helps us, because we do know that work-life balance is often a reason why people leave the organisation. And what we're starting to do, we did a lot of work last year looking at exit interviews to find out why people were leaving. We're now moving that work in the last 6 months of this year to doing more stay interviews, so offering people an opportunity to come and talk to somebody about why they about other alternative options for them.
No, that sounds good, and I know there's big focus on flexibility in terms of workforce. Thank you.
Yeah,
there are some market conditions that are benefiting us, but we are going at a faster downward rate on turnover than others in the ICS. So it's an impact of a range of issues. Just on the anti-racism work, I think we're also using the turnover lens from the other perspective, where there are groups of staff that are stuck. So for our ethnically diverse healthcare support workers in Prospect Park, we have a 5 to 6% turnover rate compared to our 13%. That does indicate there's a group that are stuck in terms of the progression focus that we're taking in my work stream. So at that lower banded level, but also at the senior bands, and getting the mix into our senior leadership team that we're striving for. So some good focus coming through the anti-racism work.
Yeah, and just to add to what Alex is saying, we did know that we had a number of healthcare support workers that were stuck, and we realised that they were stuck because they haven't got the functional skills to move into the next level. So they don't have the right level of English and maths qualifications. So this year we found some money, which we've invested in a functional skills trainer to train people up, and we have been really successful in getting those people who have been part of that programme to get their English and maths qualifications, and a number of them have just started on apprenticeships with us. So that's been an interesting trial. It's been small numbers, and as I say, we had some special funding to do that, but it has been a way of unlocking some potential for people.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Jane, Alex.
Thank you. Take care.
Let's move on to the digital strategy update. Alex, again with you, with Mark.
Yeah,
somewhere.
so I'll introduce Mark, but Mark's, as you can see, has changed the format of this update from a kind of detailed project base to give you a flavour in our new summary format for board papers, and I hope that's helpful to board members. I think the paper describes a really good mix of the work that we're driving on across those three objectives. So I'll hand over to Mark just to highlight where you'd like to, Mark, and we can have a discussion.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, without going through the whole paper, I think the kind of highlights are around the external influences are causing delays, whether that's in the supplier community, with ICS organisational reshuffles, or in NHS England. In particular, the NHS England, the national drivers are focused very heavily on acute care. If it's not acute, non-elective, then it's not on people's radar for priority implementation. And that's a kind of across the board. That's not just applying to digital, and just reflects the financial crisis in the NHS and the activity crisis, particularly coming into winter. So it's not a surprise, but it is feeling a little more challenged this year than it has in previous years. So it's feeling, I keep wanting to use the word more acute, but that's not helpful in this context. But it is feeling harder from that perspective. And how those sorts of things, whether that's at an ICS or national level, impact us are really operational. So whether that's difficulties at an ICS level of agreeing things like information governance to allow one set of clinical teams to access clinical data from another geography, which we've had particular problems with Westcall delivering Bacanims and having access to pathology in the northern part of the Bob ICS, or whether that's where we're trying to look at clinical safety, where we're moving patients between sectors, and that's some of the work that Sally was mentioning from the Quality Assurance Committee. So there aren't any red flags, but some of it's feeling quite amber from that perspective. The sort of more positive news is internally, where it is within our own control. I think we're doing really well. I think we've seen some great inroads with the automation pieces and the beginnings of some trials using real artificial intelligence interacting with patients and supporting our clinical colleagues. Early doors yet, but really encouraging. The National Federated Data Platform, in terms of analytics for ICBs and population health, I think is going to really push that agenda if the ICS organisations embrace that solution. There is a huge debate nationally from a patient representation, a professional clinical representation, and even in the digital space, it's really dividing people as to whether or not this is the way to go. But there is a £480 million contract. That doesn't mean we've handed £480 million over to a supplier and hoping for the best. It is based on meaningful use of their product set, but there's some really good stuff in there that enables you to just type in English what your population health patient cohorting requirement might be. So tell me all the left-handed females in a given geography that have hypertension and have had diabetes in the last 10 years. You can write your queries like that. You don't need to be an operational geek. The machine does it for you using AI. So there's some real great potential in those sorts of things moving forward. I think for us internally, the next period in terms of the next year really needs to focus on what's our clinical model. What do we feel where our clinical service delivery is going to look like in 5 or 10 years' time? And that kind of reflects back to the scenario planning. But it's really taking that to the next level, because we're creating capability in our digital art of the possible, if you like. And we had the first discussion of that at the exec and SLT evening last week, and really starting to think, how could we reimagine clinical services differently with a digital enabler?
Well, thank you very much. Sorry, have you finished, Mark?
Yeah.
So I was just gonna add one other highlight from the update, Mark, which was the partnership enabling with the voluntary and charity sector. I think that is pretty groundbreaking in terms of setting up the digital marketplace, as you call it, that allows access between our partners. And given the challenges the health and care system faces, the support of the voluntary and charity sector and us working together well and effectively is really important for the future. So it's really good to see that development happening.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It's really good stuff. Tamina.
Yes, a couple of things. I was at a digital conference last week, and there was a slightly tepid response to the presentation on the work that Palantir is doing with the NHS. But I think primarily, as you say in your paper, because pharmacy data, GP data isn't included at all, primary care data, and that's perceived to be quite a gap and quite a challenge. The other thing I found out was that NHSC in the South East region is doing some work with, certainly with Lightfoot, which is an organisation that looks at data in a number of different ways, trying to pull together the information that we have through all of our common data sets to see whether that will provide some insights that we could follow up. So I think they're doing some work initially in Hampshire, but they are interested in testing it out in Berkshire as well. So I suppose it's just saying there's a number of different opportunities that if we could grab hold of them quickly, we might be able to make use of them at an earlier stage.
You there, Mark?
Yeah, is my microphone not working again? Sorry.
Sorry, no, you just looked as though it wasn't. But I've just got something which I want to pick up on something you said, Mark, because I think it's an important issue for the board going forward, which is you and your colleagues have been very helpfully developing and testing and prototyping all sorts of tools and techniques, you know, from robots to joined up care, etc. And you made the point about we all sit down and sort of re-envision, I think was your phrase. And it does seem to me that we've got a position in the organisation where we've sort of learnt the risks and benefits and possibilities of all these technical wizardry, and that maybe we all sort of turn things on the head. So rather than saying, you know, we want to roll out, I don't know, 50 more robots or whatever the thing is, we actually say, how do we want to, if this all is possible, how do we want to run the trust and how do we want it to look like in 3-5 years? And therefore, that would tell you which of these technical things is probably the ones that really need to expand and some others maybe are not so important. To sort of turn it on its head. So rather than this is the technology, let's see what we can do with it. We've got enough confidence now, I assume. We should say, this is what we want to do. Now, which bits of technology do we need to advance more rapidly or whatever? I don't know what colleagues think, but I sort of feel we're getting to a point where there is a chance for quite a substantial think piece about how we run the organisation.
I think Mark's point about building our capability to now, and we need to step into the space of what does a future service model look like, supported by technology, and actually that will become some new strategic conversations that we set up early in the new year. And that was discussion at our exec and senior leadership team when we were looking at the art of the possible. And I know Tamina and her divisional director colleagues are very keen to do that. So it'll be about creating the space, and we would like to bring that to the board as we develop that over the next year as part of our discursive sessions, Martin.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think it's a really exciting time, and with the pressures on the NHS for all sorts of reasons, I think, this is a possible, it's a personal view, but I think it's, something we really need to press ahead with. Naomi.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I just have a question around kind of the feedback loop. So from either service users, patients, or indeed staff on the advances that we make, technological advances we make, or the deployment of, you know, the kind of standard things that that staff would expect around laptops or iPads, etc. So the processes that we use to get those kind of feedbacks, and then how do we use that feedback going forward?
From the patient side of it, it's wrapped up into that kind of patient experience piece. So it's less specifically poking at digital and more about how easy is it to access a service. So there's an assumption that either we're hindering it or we're helping it, because if it's a good access and I can change my appointment at the push of a button on my phone, then I guess I'm happy. And if I can't, I think it's, yeah. So there's that point from the patient's perspective. From the staff's perspective, it's that constant feedback, whether that's through forums. So we have a bunch of Teams forums where people are commenting positively and negatively on a daily basis about their experience, and that's acted upon. Then there's the trust leadership and management forums, where through the kind of you said we did, and there's a more formal follow-up in that approach to make sure that if people are suggesting that I don't have the right equipment, or the network's a bit ropey at hospital X, or was last month, that actual action happens to get that going, and to then follow up if the problem is still there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Mark.
I think, just to add, I think there are questions in the staff survey around, do I have the tools to do my job? And we had a big shift in our IT approach from listening into action, structured engagement events a number of years ago. We're going to rerun those in February across the organisation, a new set of big conversations, and that will definitely pick up any issues around our IT delivery.
Thanks so much, Alex. Julian.
Yeah, just a couple of things, just very quickly. It's not scientific, Naomi, but the best feedback I have about IT is normally people who at induction who've been away and then come back. Oh my gosh, I never realised where, you know, you're light years ahead, which obviously the objective data tells us in terms of our sort of benchmarking, really. Just talking to Martin's point, I wouldn't like people to think that Mark and colleagues invented technology and they're now looking for reasons. So if you look about the automation, the strategic goal in the strategy is to take out mundane activity, of which so that was the exam question, of which the deployment of the robots. I think where Martin's point is pertinent is we've gone with the willing, often services who are in a good place, and therefore perhaps are not benefiting it as much. And now we've got the proof of concept. I know Alex and Tamina have got an action now, Martin, to look at the services who could most benefit from the deployment of that, because actually they're tied up with so much stuff, but perhaps they're swamped with a range of things. It's making them difficult. And also, we've only done it in clinical areas to date. And I think that there is a huge opportunity in non-clinical. So, for example, as opposed to thinking about how trust can share accounts payable, you know, in the US, that will be done by a robot. So, you know, we ought to be moving into that direction rather than perhaps deck chair shuffling, I think, in the future. And then the final point was, I don't know if people saw the sort of article where Streeting was in Singapore, and it was very much because, you know, the financial situation isn't going to change whoever's in government in the next few years, was looking at the digital piece. And of course you can't just lift and shift, but one of the things that was really striking about the Singapore experience, and where we score less well on as a trust, is the patient enabled bit of digital. So the empowering patients through digital. So at every step at the hospital, you know, patients would have been told in advance what was going to happen, by when, and all the rest of it. Whereas most of those questions, if you're a patient, you know, from your experience, you have to ask and chase around and all the rest of it, really. I do think that's probably one of the areas where Mark talked about the federated data platform, but for connected care, that feels like one of the undeveloped areas where Martin, you described what does the world of tomorrow need given the financial constraints, workforce constraints, and patient satisfaction. That does feel like an area for us to sort of perhaps get into a bit more. And I'm meeting with Mark and his senior team, I think, tomorrow. And I think sometimes that's probably where you want some top-down ideas, because I don't know what the art of the possible is, but actually, you know, what's currently possible with our infrastructure that might enable a greater empowered sort of patient population, and by when would be really helpful to hear. It just feel like that's one of our sort of areas where we're less strong on. There's a couple of thoughts.
Thank you very much, Julian. Hayley.
Oh, yeah, hi. Yeah, it sounds like lots and lots of progress are being made, so that's great to hear. In the paper, it talks about robust governance and oversight arrangements when you're talking about saving of staff time. Can we hear a little bit more about that? Because that's the area where benefits are always much more difficult to actually realise, because you're saving time and then people just do different stuff. So I'm interested to hear what we're doing to make sure that we do actually take the benefits, you know, realise those benefits and make good use of the people time that it gives us.
So the governance process is principally led by the divisional directors and ops. So it's a dog wagging the tail, not the opposite way around, which is great. So that's in terms of priorities of what we work on and what we don't. And each opportunity, as they're identified or examined, are forensically looked at with ourselves and in terms of process mapping and finance in terms of numbers. So effectively, then what we get is we've kind of got a rule that says we're not allowed to write down a benefit that finance can't verify. So we're very clear then on what the opportunity is, and then there's a high level of visibility of those benefits as they're achieved, both to the service lead and to their financial business partner. So when it comes to looking at control totals, what organisational change can happen, those things are fed in. So that sounds very grandiose and fantastic. On the ground, what it means is that if I really do find 32 whole-time equivalents of spare capacity or generate that through an automation, then the operational managers and the financial controllers of that area are aware of it, it's visible to them, and they can do something with it. At the moment, the scale's not big enough. So in terms of, and I suppose I've got to be fair to the project team and say they're only 9 months in to when we agreed to this process. So, and the first 6 months of that 9 months was gearing up the staffing. So there's a fair way to go. But for what we've achieved at the moment, in many cases, I think the report to the Trust Business Group next week, I think it is. Is it next week? Yes. We'll basically be saying that it's too small a scale, and we need to look for larger opportunities, and we need to drive those through in order to turn it into cash releasing savings. At the moment, we've got productivity and efficiency. What we don't have is huge volumes of cash releasing.
I guess it's always a problem if you're saving time of a few hours here, a few hours there. You need to actually probably end up redesigning the service so that you can collect all those bits into one person, and then that one person can do something pretty different. Otherwise, they get lost. I think that's the point that Aileen was sort of making. Get lost in the margins.
That's absolutely right, Martin. It's a circular process, though, isn't it? You create those opportunities, you create those savings. That gives you the headspace and to deliver a reimagined service if you know what your clinical model that you're aiming for is.
Yeah.
Because you'll tweak it and twiddle around the edges a little bit if you're not driving to a new model.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay. I just got a question, if I may, which is just that if you look at the NHS developments and you look at our own developments within Berkshire, etc., and within the trust, there's quite a sort of difficult job, isn't there, to manage local advances compared to regional or national. And there's a sort of danger you can get into, which is you either sort of rush ahead with your local ones because we're doing a great job, and you and your colleagues are doing a great job, and get the benefits locally, but then you find you're out of kilter with something that's being done at a bigger scale. On the other hand, if you wait for the bigger scale to tell you what to do, you're probably going to wait forever. So how are we going to manage this complexity of both the larger geographical scale and the local one, and also within our partners within our local area? It sounds quite a complicated sort of strategy thing. So we don't just, we don't become isolated but beautiful, but unable to join up with everybody else. I can put it that way.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think it feels sometimes more of an art than it does a science. We haven't hit that situation yet where we've invested heavily in something digital and it's been replaced by a national thing. That's not happened in my 30 years in the NHS. Okay. I'll let everyone draw their own conclusions about what that says. But what is happening is making sure what we do locally dovetails into all those national things. So if you think about things like shared care records and the work we do there to make sure that we surface information through shared care records, which is consumable at a regional level, is integratable at a national level, and there are some things which clearly make sense nationally. So the classic for me is the NHS app on your phone that was originally a COVID pass is now being developed nationally. There's huge investment going into it. It's not something we could ever replicate locally. So it makes sense for us to play into that sphere. So we put our energies into, so I had a meeting literally yesterday with NHS England where we are saying yet again, don't focus on acute, okay? We in mental health, we use acute-based tools, we deliver them in a different way, and we can participate. And as I described at the moment, right now, GP appointment data in West Berkshire is in the NHS app, RBH data is in there, and there's a big hole in the Polo Mint, which is us, for community and mental health data. That's not helpful to our patients. And you have to put it in context and be able to then persuade them to fast track what you want to do. So for us, we have a small investment in our patient activity and booking system, and it pays dividends to our patients in a geography because we're joined up. So it's just knowing all the areas, Martin, and yeah. I think the advantage we've got is that we are more agile locally, so we are always ahead of the curve compared to national. It takes a long time. So where they're putting in things like the federated data platform, it's taken them 4 years to get there. One area where we might want to consider local action that we've not taken before is we're now clear that nationally the new electronic staff record and recruitment system won't surface for another 5 to 7 years. So we could choose to do something different locally. There's some risks around doing that, but we could choose to do that. And if we get into that business case approach, then we examine it from that perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously this is a huge issue, and it's nice to see the chief executive smiling on that. So, but thank you very much for what you're doing, your team. And I think I do feel that we're getting to a point where it isn't the tools that are missing now; it's what we want to do with the tools on a bigger scale, as well as, of course, the sort of nightmare of all joining up at the different levels, which I'm sure your art is going to be very helpful at steering us through that. Thank you very much, Mark. Very helpful.
Martin, can I?
Yes. I'm sorry, Aileen. I missed you. Sorry.
Just apologise. Mark was halfway through his answer to me and my computer completely crashed. So I didn't hear the end of his answer, but I will catch up with Mark at a later point. So apologies for not responding.
You need a new laptop. That's what you need.
I think I may do.
Yeah.
I think I've just got some feedback there.
Okay.
Go to 1 hour 25 on the recording, Aileen.
Thanks so much, everyone. Let's move on then. Councillor Governor's update. I've just got one observation. Well, two. One is that the governor's process seems to be working well, and secondly, the governors have been quite advanced in terms of their visit reports, etc. And it was mentioned in Sally's quality minutes, so which is I'm very pleased about, because again, quite helpful and informative reports coming in, feeding in. So thank you to the governors for that. Item 9.3 is external well-led review plan. Julie, are you going to try? Do you want to take this, or shall I?
I mean, I think I'll take it as read. There's only two outstanding, which is around the checklist for major decision making and the shadow board, and both, and we'll progress those two actions in the new year.
Okay. I just got just to say I've been on a training course on risk appetite, because I said I would, and I think a couple of others are, and I'll have a little chat with you about that perhaps in part 2, just to see how we go. In which case I think we are nearly. Any other business? Go to next meeting. Public meeting is the 9th of January, and where we'll adopt our normal resolution to exclude members of the press and public from the remainder of the meeting. Oh, Rebecca, sorry, you had your hand up. I missed you.
That's all right.